Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopidana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopidana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yasodhanana Brajadana Ranjana. Yasodhanandana Brajadana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Kadamba Shivasani Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jai Prabhupada. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Harinam Sankirtan Yagya ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaisnava Vrinda ki jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Sisi Radharana ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Guru. Open book, please. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Which verse? Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 14. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, the 3rd canto, chapter 22, the marriage of Kadamba Muni and Devahuti, text number 14. Aham tvasinavam vidvan vivahartam samujatam atastvam upakurvanaha pratam pratigrahaname aham tvasinavam vidvam vivahartam samujjatam atastvam upakurvana pratam pratigrihaname. Ladies, aham, I, tva, you, asinavam, heard, vidvan, O wise man, vivahartam, for the sake of marriage, samujjatam, prepared, attaha, hence, tvam, you, upakurvanaha, not taken a vow of perpetual celibacy. Pratam, offered. Pratigrihana, please accept. Me, of me. Translation. Swayambhuva continued. O wise man, I heard that you were prepared to marry. Please accept her hand, which is being offered to you by me, since you have not taken a vow of perpetual celibacy. Purport. The principle of brahmacharya is celibacy. There are two kinds of brahmacharis. One is called Naistiki brahmachari, which means one who takes a vow of celibacy for his whole life. Whereas the other, the Upakurvana brahmachari, is a brahmachari who takes the vow of celibacy up to a certain age. For example, he may take the vow to remain celibate up to 25 years of age, then with the permission of his spiritual master, he enters married life. Brahmacharya is student life, the beginning of life in the spiritual orders, and the principle of brahmacharya is celibacy. Only a householder can indulge in sense gratification or sex life, not a brahmachari. Swayambhuva requested Kadamba Muni to accept his daughter, since Kadamba had not taken the vow of Naistika brahmacharya. He was willing to marry, and the suitable daughter of a high royal family was presented. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Salakya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namah. Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sigaro Seyuta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaisnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Visakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpati Gopesa Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrisabhana Sutta Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpatarubhya Cha Kripa Sindhubhye Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaisnavebhyo Namo Namah. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Lord Rishabdev, in the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, is instructing his 100 sons, and Lord Rishabdev is saying, Nayam deho bhajam nirloke kastan kamam arte vidbujjam ye tapo divyam putra kayena sattvam sujityasmai pramasokyam tanantam. And here Lord Rishabdev has analyzed the situation in which the embodied living being finds himself in the material world. The being embodied, we are facing the pushings of the senses. the body is automatically programmed in such a way. Vacha vegam, manasa krodha vegam, udrapasta vegam, etan vegam. So it is said there are the pushings of the mind, the pushings of anger, the pushings of the tongue, the belly, the genitals, all these pushings we are facing while we are in the embodied state. So, therefore, the Vedic culture is dealing with this and pointing out that we are not this body, and we are not just simply meant to follow the dictates of the senses, but rather we are meant to engage in tapodivyam, in not just in austerity, but in austerity to reach a transcendental goal. Austerity in itself is not adequate, is not sufficient. One may perform austerity, but ultimately that austerity has to lead towards self-realization, towards understanding transcendental knowledge. Therefore that austerity is simply in support of cultivating transcendental knowledge. Then it is tapodivyam, and then the result can be brahma sukyam tanantam. Then the result can be transcendental happiness, to become situated in one's eternal position, to understand that actually the body, the relationship with the body is only temporary and not factual. It is always changing. Everything in this material world is always changing. And the changes that we are going through in the material body are very quickly following one another. Denusminyata dehe komaram yonam jara. And in this way we're going from childhood to youth and very soon into old age. And before we know it, it ends with death. That cycle will continue life after life, and dhirastata namuyati, and the wise, they are not disturbed by such a situation, because they don't identify with the material body. For all practical purposes, it may not be so easy. It may require some serious practice, some serious cultivation of this transcendental knowledge. Abhyasa yoga yuktena cetasa ananyagamina paramam purusham divyam yati partanasintya. That is why Kadamba Muni, who was part of a culture where spiritual life was the ultimate goal in society, that is why Kadamba Muni was practicing austerity. And he took up a very renounced position. He resided in a simple hermitage in a forest. He made a strict commitment to the vow of brahmacharya, which is very difficult. It is very difficult, this vow of brahmacharya. We remember how the story of Bhishmadev unfolded. Bhishmadev, his father, Maharaj Santanu, wanted, he was a ruling king, and somehow or other, even at an older age, he wanted to marry again. So he expressed, the king was in a clearly distressed state, and he was addressing his son. And he said, "My dear son, I want to get married again." And so the son said, "Father, that is not a problem. That is not a problem. That is allowed." "Yes," said the king, "but there are complications." what are these complications? She is the daughter of a fisherman. Well, that in itself doesn't need to be a major complication, because it is said one can accept nectar of poison, good instruction from a fool, and one can accept even a good wife from a low family. So that in itself is also not prohibitive. If she is qualified, then that is fine. Then the king said, no, that's not the issue. That's not the issue. The issue is her father. Is it the father? Yes, her father is impossible. He just won't agree to the marriage. Bhishma Dev said, don't worry. I will go and I will take up this matter and negotiate. So Bhishma Dev went. Bhishma Dev spoke to the fisherman, and indeed he was driving a hard bargain. The fisherman said, no, this marriage will never take place. It will never take place. Bhishma Dev said, but don't be foolish. I mean, you are a poor fisherman. Your daughter will become a queen, the wife of a king. She'll be very opulent. She'll bring so much to your family. He said, no, I will not have it, this marriage. He said, because I would only accept it if the son of my daughter would be king. Bhishma said, well, that's a little complicated, because I'm the elder one, and I'm supposed to be the king. Well, then there's no marriage. Then Bhishma Dev said, all right, I renounce my right to the throne. He can have the throne. Then the fisherman said, no, the marriage cannot happen. He said, why not? I have even renounced the throne, and the son of your daughter can become the king. And you're still not satisfied. What is your problem now? He said, no, the son of my daughter will become king, and then your son will fight with him and kill him over the throne. He said, and my daughter will be very unhappy. No, this marriage cannot be. Then Bhishma Dev said, all right, I will never get married. And it said, it is then that the demigods, they spoke out in consternation, in shock, and they said, oh, the Brihad Vrata, the great vow, the great vow. So Brahmacharya has been described as the Brihad Vrata, the great vow, a great vow that is difficult to maintain over time, a great vow that requires protection. One cannot merely take a vow and think, now it's done. Now it is done. Because over time, the weight of tapasya is being felt. As we are practicing austerity, if I may bring in a material example, if we have to unload a truck with bricks, and we are taking, in the beginning, we take, how many? 10 in one go. 10 bricks. But the experienced ones, they're not taking 10 bricks. They take only 5. Because they know after a while you get tired. And then the bricks feel much heavier. So they'll take 5 and in this way unload the whole truck. So that is the nature of austerity. That over time the weight of the austerity is increasing. It is increasing. Therefore, in spiritual life, there is a very interesting principle. And the principle is that in the beginning, we are coming to Krishna consciousness, and yes, we can renounce. Yes, I renounce sense gratification. Yes, I renounce. Yes, I'll be a brahmachari. Uh, and we come with fresh inspiration from having given up material life and having now embraced spiritual life. But then after some time, it is difficult. It becomes more difficult to maintain that brahmacharya. And we begin to wonder, can I really do this? It is true that any position of renunciation and any position of austerity, unless it is nourished by transcendental realization, will be difficult to maintain. In the material world, when we are taking up a particular task, in the beginning we're a little slow, but after a while, when we've done it many times, we become really expert. Some people are like that with puja. Like in Vrindavan, we used to have a pujari who had been the pujari since Prabhupada's time, named Omkara. And Omkara was just a phenomenon. I mean, we'd never seen anybody like Omkara. The way he could dress deities, it was inconceivable. He would dress all the deities, all of them, in Vrindavan, 3 altars, right? All the deities, all of them. He would just like work on all the 3 altars so fast. I mean, so incredibly fast, and then so expert, right? It was just all like perfect, and every day totally different. You never knew what to expect. It wasn't like a variety of a certain style. No, every day a totally different darshan. Very expert, very, very expert. So when we become expert at something, we can become very fast in doing a task. It becomes easier over time as we are gaining experience. In spiritual life, it is interesting that in the beginning we seem to take up big positions of renunciation relatively easy. Brahmacharya, yes, no problem. 7. We don't do much for it. But with time, as time is passing, we'll have to do more to actually nourish the determination to maintain this tapasya. And that nourishment has to come from spiritual realization. So actually over time we realize we need more. Maybe 16 rounds is not enough. Where you go, 16 rounds is a little meager. Right? That's not like very much. That's really like a minimal chanting. Only so little. Over time, to keep the position of celibacy, which is the Brihad Vrata, the great vow, requires more and more offerings to Krishna. More and more needs to be offered to really maintain it. Therefore, even great sages who are very austere, a sage like Kadamba Muni, who was of high caliber, principled, who was dedicated to Dharma and who would not deviate by any means, but who was intelligent, who was thoughtful, who was knowledgeable, who understood the weight of austerity, and that with time that weight would increase. And therefore, he had not taken that vow of Naistiki Brahmachari, of Brahmacharya for life. There is a difference in taking a vow for life or taking a vow of celibacy for either a particular amount of time or it's just like I sometimes use the example. The brahmachari locks the front door, but the back door is still open. right? And he could always go out via the back door. Sannyasi, all doors locked and the key thrown away. Finished, right? No more. That is a different vow. But how can it be maintained? Huh? Etam sastaya paratmanista adyasitam puvatamam mahatbi aham tarishyami duranta param tamo mukundangri niseveva. How can it be maintained? How can one maintain such an austere vow and cross over the ocean of material existence? Only by taking shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna. Only then it can be done. And that is the so Kadamba Muni at this stage was not parattanista. He was not yet fixed in that resolve from I'm done with this, I simply want to absorb in service of the Supreme Lord. And he was ready to be married. So he had somehow or other communicated this point, and in the Vedic culture, it is a father's duty to assure that his daughter is married to a suitable party and well protected. And of course, a father wants to do so out of love for his daughter. He looks for a suitable match. And in this case, Devahuti was a very qualified lady, because not only were sages, not only were the brahmanas rishis, but the rajas, the kings, were also rishis. So we had Brahma rishis, Raja rishis, brahmanas who were sages. We had kings who were also saintly kings, and the saintly kings, they were not just saintly kings just like that by good karma, but there was good karma obviously, but these saintly kings beyond that were also taking up a sadhana, a process of purification. And therefore we chant Om apavitra pavitro va sarvavastakato piva yasmarit pundarikaksam sabhaya bhyantara suchi. It doesn't matter from wherever we come, from Om pavitro apavitra, whether we come from a pure background or an impure background, it doesn't matter. We still, whatever conditions we come from, sarva avasta, from any condition we can attain the supreme call. We can, but only yasmarit pundarikaksam, only if we remember the lotus-eyed Supreme Lord. And remembering the lotus-eyed Supreme Lord requires a sadhana, requires practice. Therefore, austerity will never do. The essence is remembrance of the Supreme Lord, and austerity is simply meant to support that and to strengthen us in our resolve to dedicate ourselves to remembering the Supreme Lord. Therefore, tapodivyam, as I was explaining, the transcendental austerity is required. Not just austerity, but tapodivyam. So, Kadamba Muni apparently had been well anchored in austerity and in renunciation for the sake of purification. His focus on the Supreme Lord certainly was there, but somehow or other, his attachment to the Supreme Lord apparently hadn't sufficiently deepened for him to take that step of just giving up material enjoyment altogether and say, yeah, I'll just remain a brahmachari. Because the brahmachari position is the best. Because after all, it is the position of the least interaction with the material energy. The brahmachari position is, if you don't need it, don't use it. The grihasta's position, if it's not forbidden to use it, why wouldn't you use it? That was a rule of thumb, one could say. So one rule is, well, if there's no injunction against using it, then it's bona fide, right? Read the label. It's fine, you know? Yes. Yes, okay, it's fine. But, you know, like you have the packet of chips, you read the label, it's fine. But in our Madan Mohan, who has, you know, he used to take me to the chips factory nearby. And I got a full tour of the chips factory. And I saw the trucks of potatoes come in and being sliced, and then it goes on the conveyor belt, and it would just dry. Hot air was blown on these slices of potato. They were washed somewhere else. Anyway, they were drying. And then there was a dip on the conveyor belt, and they went into the hot oil, and then after some spices were like blown on it, right, with air. And then the workers would just dip their hands into it and go munch, munch, munch. Munch, munch, munch. Now imagine, we're cooking for Krishna, and all the ingredients are pure and great, and someone comes in the kitchen and sticks their hand into the pot, munch, munch, munch. Would we still offer it to Krishna? So, just see, a packet of chips can be complicated to offer, really. I learned that from that visit to that factory, and that was interesting. I saw the hand dipping into the chips. Well, I mean, tasty, hot chips, fresh. I mean, hard to control the senses. So, just see, different standards, different levels. So, the best, of course, is to have pure ingredients. The best ingredients which are grown by the Vaishnavas. The best, that these ingredients are then prepared by the Brahmanas and so on, and for the Supreme Lord, and then offered, and then, yes, that's the best. We find in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, we find the description of Nimai had taken sannyas. He's on the way to Vrindavan, but he's in great ecstasy. Nityananda is manipulating him due to his state of love of God. He is not exactly clear about finding the way, so Nityananda takes advantage of it and manipulates him in the direction of Advaitacharya's house, and he winds up in Advaitacharya's house. Immediately, it is arranged that all the devotees who were in great separation of Lord Chaitanya are now coming to the house of Advaitacharya. Sachi Devi is also brought in. And then she knows that now that Nimai has taken sannyas, by etiquette, he should not see his family. That was an external etiquette, which he, according to time, place, and circumstance, was being followed. And then Sachi Devi begged one favor. She begged the favor that she would be allowed to cook. And then she cooked, and she knew it was going to be the last time that she was cooking for Nimai. For about a week, he stayed. And she knew every meal, she put in everything she had, right? And then it was offered, and then everyone would taste the prasadam. And it was prasadam like no one had ever tasted. The bhakti was just, everyone was just rolling on the ground, swooning. What prasadam is this? It's just out of this world. It's just amazing. So here we see the quality that is invested. So the brahmachari is meant to keep material life very simple and to just spend his time in humble service to the spiritual master, and otherwise in thoroughly studying the scriptures and getting deeply absorbed. And by this absorption, it can be done. Only then, on the strength of this service, there is the spiritual nourishment. And when the spiritual nourishment is there, then it's possible to carry the weight of austerity. But when the spiritual nourishment is poor, it's like when I first moved in the temple, then in those days the question was, well, are you single or do you have a girlfriend? No, I don't really have a girlfriend. Okay, then you're a brahmachari, right? And that was about it. And don't let us, and the rule is, don't let us catch you with any lady, all right? Very clear. Yeah, and that was about it. There was the ashram wasn't filled in. There was not much culture. But over time, we understood the need for cultivation. If you want to be a brahmachari, you can be. You can be. It's not about where you have to cut the buttons, have to count the buttons on your kurta. Am I a brahmachari? Am I not a brahmachari? Am I a brahmachari? Am I not a brahmachari? And you sew on an extra button, right? That's not required. That's not required. Everyone can be a brahmachari if there is enough spiritual nourishment. But then, that doesn't come cheap. For nourishment, we have to do something. There is a proverb, I just forgot the Sanskrit to tell you the truth, but it says that even the lion is so powerful. Even the lion has to work for its food. It's not that the deer will just run into its mouth. Even the lion has to work. So if we want to be a brahmachari, we can be. But we have to work for it. And that's the best. Oh yes. And then that is the best. That is the best. Because then we are free. Then we don't have to have a job. Then we don't have to learn any. For the job you have to learn so much rubbish. Yeah? So much rubbish one has to learn in the professional world. Study this, that. Forget it. No need. Just study the Bhagavatam. What is better than that? Kirtani. Just chant and study the Bhagavatam and serve Krishna. What is better than that? Therefore, this brahmacharya is something very precious. We should consider it and not too easily throw in the towel. Anyway, that's what I wanted to present to you. Because if one can spend all his time with Krishna, what is better than that? Grihastha life is so much for Krishna, so much for me. Always balancing two interests. Brahmacharya, only one interest. Service of Guru and Gauranga. Haribol. Happy life. So, any questions? Any comments? Please, Maharaj.
Kadamba was not like a sort of a classic devotee. He was like there was an element of mystic yoga. Yeah. And he had been practicing that for 10,000 years. So anyway, still he ended up feeling that he really required to go through the experience of household life. But from what we read, he wasn't like a real sadhaka in bhakti.
Yeah.
Although he was also, Krishna conscious,
right,
to some degree.
Yes. Yeah, that is a very... There are many aspects to this situation, and I drew from the example of Kadamba and sort of applied it a bit more towards our our own spiritual life. But if we look at Kadamba, Kadamba was a yogi. There was an element of cultivating mystic power. We see that Kadamba Muni had tremendous mystic powers. Later on, he creates a plain which is like a city with gardens, and where he is flying with Devahuti. It's quite amazing what Kadamba actually can do as a yogi, what an achieved yogi he is, so that mystic element is very strong. It is all happening in another yuga. Therefore, we see people at that time are transcendentalists. The inclination is very much there towards transcendental life, but they are not. But the unique quality of Lord Chaitanya's movement, right, is as we see that we are not so qualified, but there is such a focus, such a clear focus on Krishna and devotional service on Krishna and giving up everything and anything else. That unique focus, that's especially now, that wasn't there at the time. It's like all a little bit more blurred. And that's an element that comes into play with Kadamba Muni. And then another thing which is in the background is to what extent is there all a divine arrangement, right? Because ultimately he is to become, they are to become the parents of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So how much was he inspired from within to go towards in this marriage direction? That question is always one that's sort of playing in the background if I'm zooming in on Kadamba Muni. Anyway, but it is a very the Bhagavatam is, we are reading about the personalities in the Bhagavatam and their nature and qualities, and we learn from them. And yes, it is also important to bring it back to ourselves so that we apply the Bhagavatam in our life, that we become engaged with the Bhagavatam. If we only study the Bhagavatam and only look at Kadamba Muni at a distance, that would not be enough. We need to take the principles that are taught by the Mahajanas and Mahajani Yena Gata Sapantana, following in the footsteps of these great personalities. You have a question.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, you speak of heaviness and you speak of austerity for austerity's sake. No, what I want to know, like for instance, we should know, like, what is the austerity for this age? What is like a bona fide austerity for this age? Because it is said that Krishna he likes to steal the hearts that are soft hearts. And you speak of transcendental happiness. How do we see transcendental happiness? How do we spot it? How do we identify that this devotee is experiencing transcendental happiness based on his austerities? So, like, what is the austerity for this age, and how to how to apply?
Well, I spoke about austerity. When austerity involves voluntarily giving up the propensity to enjoy the material energy and taking up voluntarily difficulty to attain a better goal in the long term. Yeah? So, if you want a lot of money, yeah, you have to perform austerity to get it. You have to work very hard, this, that, and then in the end, I'm rich after the austerity. So the austerity has to be performed first. You're not going to be rich just by doing nothing. So austerity comes up in in every situation. There's a need for austerity in life. So it's a fundamental element in life, austerity. But we were speaking about transcendental austerity, tapodivyam. So where the austerity is linked to service, to at least a transcendental purpose, in the case of the yogi on connecting with the Supreme Lord, but mixed with getting mystic powers and so on. In our case, simply focused on devotional service. So I said, when austerity is combined with devotional service, then that austerity supports the devotional service and brings strength in our practice, in our sadhana. So then it is helpful, such austerity. So therefore we're accepting ashrams. In the ashrams there's always an element of austerity, because in every ashram we're voluntarily restricting sense gratification. That austerity is there. And instead of sense gratification, we are engaging in devotional service and are trying to dedicate our energy and time towards Krishna. By doing so, if we have for a prolonged period of time engaged in the service of Krishna and just given up the sense gratification, although the mind is struggling a little bit in giving up the sense gratification, we feel the pain a little bit, but we just carry on and we serve Krishna, right, for a prolonged period of time, then from that service we'll get happiness. We'll get happiness. And as we're getting more and more happiness, the austerity begins to look more insignificant. The pushings of the senses, right, that are still there, it is like we engage in devotional service, but the senses are still knocking on the door of our mind. Come on, what are you doing? The senses are still knocking on the door of the mind. But as we are engaging more and more in the service, the knocking becomes less and less loud. And sometimes there's no knocking at all. So that is the result of the transcendental happiness. And that will increase over time until, we don't care about the senses. Whether they knock or don't knock, forget it. Not going to bother with them. Where will that lead to? And there's so much taste in devotional service. So we should get absorbed in devotional service. Then we're full of spiritual knowledge, nourishment, and that will bring the happiness. Shall I stop? Yeah, I guess.
I fully agree from the heart that
But
that the educational system teaches you rubbish. Like, I fully agree, but I was thinking that we don't have so much of a culture to support brahmacharis.
no problem. We can engage the rubbish in the service of Krishna if we want. And then the rubbish also becomes purified. Yeah. We can learn all kinds of things that in itself are not useful, right? That are just taking us away from Krishna. Like, say, you become an IT specialist, right? And you spend how many hours do you have to spend to figure out that machine? It takes a lot of time to doctor it out. Years you have to figure out this system, that system. And all that time you could have spent studying Bhagavatam. So you studied all these things. In your case you studied chemistry. All these things we study that take us away from Krishna. Now we can bring it back. We can work in the world with this IT, make money for it, and maintain a Krishna conscious household. Then it comes back to Krishna conscious. We can do some service with it as well, and in this way it becomes purified. We've engaged it in the service of Krishna. Then it brings us back to Krishna. That is the beauty of Yukta Vairagya, which we discussed a few days ago. But we also discussed the dangers of Yukta Vairagya, that things do not necessarily change their nature. If things are coming from a lower mode, we can still use it in the service of Krishna, but it still comes from the lower mode, the thing itself. Like this microphone, right? It's like, it's an electronic thing in front of my face. I don't know how healthy it is. I don't know what it will do to my subtle body or whatever. Anyway, we don't worry about it. But I gave away my Apple Watch because I was scared of the thing. Especially after a little bout with cancer. I said, forget it. I don't need one. Just the old-fashioned watch, you know? This is old-fashioned. I love it. It works. Tells me the times, all I want to know. So the point is, if we can keep it simple, that's better. If we have to make it complicated, yes, make it complicated and offer it to Krishna.
For those who want to keep it simple, I feel like the culture of how to maintain the lifestyle as a brahmachari or a brahmacharini isn't really, it's like you sort of have to do it on your own. And how to do it, you figure it on your own. And it's like,
no matter how much culture there is, Rukmini, whether we would have a lot of support culture or whether we have little support culture, at the end, you have to do it on your own. Even amidst so much support culture, it still comes down on the individual's commitment. We can take the horse to water, yeah? But still the horse has to drink. So support culture can be helpful. Too much support culture excessive support culture may take away some element of austerity. So support culture has pros and cons. Yes, there must be support culture. Excessive support culture may also take away the struggle of life. Just like a child. Overly protected child save the child from a lot of trouble, but the child doesn't grow up and doesn't learn to fight. So in this way, support structure has a place, it has pros and cons. The essence, ultimately it comes down to individual commitment. I'll end with that, and I thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.